All right, great. So, love to see some familiar faces and some new faces in the chat. And yeah, for those of you who just joined us, I'm Aurora Dreger. I'm the project director for the Educating All Learners Alliance, and we're going to kick off today's webinar presentation centering youth voice in education. All right. So a little bit about EALA, or the Educating All Learners Alliance for short. Um, Great. So while we're getting our chat preferences sorted out, I'll give you a little bit of background on ELA, a little bit of background on the orgs that are presenting today, and then we'll get that chat up and running so that you can interact with us. So, what is ELA? You're all here today probably because of you're connected with ELA in some way, or you're part of an organization that has connected with ELA. So just as kind of regrounding and to kick us off, we're a coalition of over 170 organizations, all committed to resource sharing and community building, and pushing capacity in the field, so that we can support learners with disabilities, students who learn differently, and anybody who has traditionally had a barrier to their education. ELA is working to elevate and advance progress in the field so that every child can receive a free and appropriate public education. So the Alliance represents voices from all parts of the sector, all parts of the world of education. We've got parent advocates, people who focus on disability, advocacy, special education organizations, teacher training, civil rights, nonprofits, all kinds of groups together, ed tech, folks together kind of lending their voice um, to push the field forward. So um, as I get into today's agenda, and again, just double checking here, making sure everything's good in the chat. Um, Great. So just a quick look at what we're going to do today. We're going to kick off with an introduction around, I'm going to introduce the speakers, and then they're going to give you an overview of this specific project that we're talking about today, the Youth Action Project. Grew out of an initiative at the ELA Community of Action last year, a project that's very near and dear to my heart as the ELA project director. So you're going to hear more about that, and what this Youth Action Project is, and the findings and the highlights. And then the third part of our day today, we're going to dig into specific highlights from the pilot programs. And finally, at the end, time for some questions and answers. I'm doing my best to make sure that the captions are enabled and that the chat is enabled. So I'm going to work on that on the back end while we hear from a quick introduction from our speakers. And as a reminder, today's session is being recorded, and the link will be shared with all registrants and posted on ELA's YouTube page later. And finally, type your questions in the chat or in the Q&A feature while we get the chat worked out. But so I'll kick us off with a quick introduction about myself, and then I'm going to pass it. The next person in my square is Carolyn, so I'm coming to you next, Carolyn. So my name is Aurora Dreger. I'm the ELA project director. I am Brooklyn born, bred and based, and my focus today here is as the ELA project director. Like I said, we launched an initiative at the Community of Action. And so we were able to support the work here today that we're gonna highlight. So with that, let's hear from you, Carolyn. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thanks, Aurora. So I'm Carolyn Long, and I am a speech therapist by trade, 27 years in now. And my career has spanned everything from K-12 to actually higher ed. I'm now currently the director of the Life Scholars Program, an inclusive post-secondary education program at Montana State. And so I came into this project on the side as I also work on software projects and social emotional learning. So always centering student voice and framing it around what my students need and allowing them to have a voice in it it's been a part of my my DNA for decades. So coming into this project with social optics, and that is a neurodiverse affirming social emotional learning curriculum for middle school and high school students. And yeah, so that was kind of my bridge into this fun project that we did. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Got some great movement in the chat here. Thank you, folks. Yeah, let us know your name, location, and your role. While I take it over to the next person on my screen is Eileen, and then I'm going to pass it over to Anna and Lanny. So go ahead, Eileen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eileen Mokuria. I'm the Director of Youth Programs at LiberatED. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas. I, carry so many names and, as a former educator, district administrator, and now the Director of Youth Programs at LiberatED. I'm so excited to talk about our work and get to know you all. So thank you so much.
All right, it's me next. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Anna Ivanchik, and I represent the International Youth Foundation, or IYF. We're a global youth development organization, and we just do a lot of work connecting young people with opportunities. And I'm sitting in Massachusetts, so I saw somebody from Massachusetts there, Franklin County. So yeah, very happy to be here. Passing it over to Lani.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lanny Wilmar. I'm founder of Ethos Pathways. We work on climate justice, youth workforce development, especially in rural communities. We will have a pilot running in Berkshire County. I also saw Franklin, Massachusetts, Anna. So that's very exciting. I'm calling in from North Adams, Massachusetts.
Thank you all so much. And it's great to see folks here from DC Special Ed Co-op. I saw ties. I saw lots of familiar EALA collaborators and partners as well. So shout out to the folks. Got US Virgin Islands as well, Special Ed Paraprofessional. Thank you, Adosha, for joining us. Alexandria, great. Folks from all over today joining us, and it's great to see a wonderful turnout. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Lenny and Anna. I keep saying your name and any other pronunciation than the one that we talked about. Lanny, I apologize. So before we kick it off, before I pass it over to them, yeah, it was a 12-month project that grew out of the EALA Community of Action, and which is a participatory grant funding opportunity. EALA partners and collaborators are invited to attend, work together, and develop and then implement a project based on shared problems and challenges. So we're going to get more into it. Just for a little bit of background, this is a project that I've had the honor to sort of help guide and get off the ground, but the work on the ground, all of the work, energy, the blood, sweat, and tears is all from you. So thank you so much for the work that you've done. And I'm so happy to showcase and share out what you've learned. And hopefully, maybe there's some folks out there who feel inspired maybe to scale or replicate it in their own settings. So with that, I'm going to change the slide and tell us more about this project.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Aurora. I'm very happy to kick us off with just like a brief introduction of what this is. So the Youth Action Project, to talk about what it is, it's very important to, as Aurora mentioned, talk about like how it came to be. So like the idea of this project was to have all these organizations represented here today work on a youth center initiative so that we could address the gap of like young people with disabilities and not being represented in creating solutions for young people with disabilities. And these we came together, as Aurora mentioned, through an EALA Community of Action sprint. So if you're not familiar with this, it's a very intensive 36-hour experience, which shout out to EALA for like creating it. Very unique experience. In which like a lot of like organizations in youth development, in education, committed to supporting students with disabilities get together in person, get to know each other really quickly, and then divide into small groups to create projects and solutions to then pitch to the rest of the group and collaboratively fund two of the ideas to run a 12-month project. So we were one of the two winners of the December of 2024 Sprint Community of Action, and that's how it came to be. And really what brought us together, all these organizations that you can see here on the screen, LiberatED, Social Optics, and the Transition Academy, as well as other supporting organizations like Ethos Pathways, represented by Lani, and Getting Smart, and IYF, which I represent. We all got together because we all identify the same thing. Like, we are here to talk about solutions and challenges that students with disabilities experience, and who is not in the room? Those students. So with that idea, we clearly, like, very quickly crafted this vision for this project, in which the three organizations that you see here on the screen, who have direct work with young people, could run pilots to run like a similar exercise of a collaborative and participatory approach to talk about like issues that were in their specific educational settings, and see what like young people would do, right? Like, what are like the actual issues that young people identify, and how they would, address them, and have some funds to address them, and also to have funds to support the young people as that were participating in this process. So if we go to the next slide, here you will see that beyond those three organizations that implemented the pilot groups, which you will be hearing more about in like the next slides, there were like three organizations, as I mentioned, that were also supporting this work. And here you can see a lovely picture from that weekend. We had all just met each other, so like there was also like a lot of work, and like you're just like getting these new partners, these organizations which you have never worked with before, and who is specialized in very like different like things about education and youth development. So Ethos Pathways like really helped bringing us together and being kind of like the manager of this project. IYF, we supported with some thought partnership, and Getting Smart, they helped us elevate like the results and really the approach and process of this project through a very wonderful blog, which is listed in the resources that you will see at the end. So that was basically the project. The idea was to have three different pilots, each one developed by each organization, implemented by each organization. Each organization also works in this distinct educational setting. We had Social Optics working directly in schools, LiberatED working in out of school programming, and then the Transition Academy working within schools, but like through an outside organization. So the idea was for everybody to run the process and kind of like inform like the nuances for each setting, but also see like the similarities, and like gain insights on like how people in whatever educational setting you find yourself as an educator, as a youth development facilitator, you can replicate something like this. And now I'll pass it over to Lani for some findings.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna. It's definitely worth noting the diversity within the organizations that came together so quickly for this project, which was quite incredible. And it's a testament to our work. We met monthly to really figure out what was working, to tweak the curriculum, etc. And while we all came from different parts of the US, worked with different subsets of students, the findings had a lot of parallels between all of the pilot groups. And Marissa from Getting Smart, who couldn't be here today, did a fantastic job with creating a blog post on Getting Smart. And it really publishes our overall findings within the three pilot groups. So I don't want to take too much on this slide because I want you to hear directly from the pilot leads. But really what we found is that students want to be heard. They want a voice. They want a seat at the table to talk about what's going on in their communities, in their worlds. And I'm going to kick it over to Carolyn to talk more about that.
Thanks, Lani. And someone can just go to the next slide, because this is a more interesting slide. So where social optics fit in last year. So last year I was working in a 6th grade classroom, and I had a group of about 6 young students with social emotional learning challenges. So disabilities ranging from autism to ADHD to just anger management. And so after participating in the EALA and then knowing what I know about my students and that they have a voice and they have wants, I brought this project to them. And so I put this quote here as kind of the first slide because this was a comment that one of the students made at the end of the project with what they wanted the world to know about them. And so I had a couple things that I was tackling. The first was creating a curriculum that could be done in about 6 weeks that would allow students to identify a problem, work through and identify a solution that benefited everyone. So not just their group of 6, but our entire group, which was about 350 sixth grade students, and then actually putting it into action. And then we were actually able, between that time, we started about mid-February, beginning of February. By May, we were able to actually purchase what their solution was and enact it in the classroom before we left for the end of the school year. So also including some pre-surveys, post-surveys, and then the student interviews here at the end. So in the curriculum and the link that Aurora put into the chat, when you find that, you will see it's a complete curriculum for all 6 weeks, includes the pre and post surveys, and everything to center you, including aligning it with the social emotional learning standards. So what I want to draw out in this is that often 2 things. One, the axe forgets and the tree remembers. Very often with students, there are things that are happening to them during the day, things that other students are saying that are landing and are becoming a part of the DNA of that student. And so others, including us adults, often just kind of carry on about our life and don't always carry the weight of what that really means for the students. So when we give them a voice to say, hey, that hurt, this is what I would like to see done differently, we are empowering them in such an incredible way. So next slide. Thanks. So one of the things that grounds me in my approach always, and this is a book that was published maybe 2 years ago, but I think it has some really nice and new way to reframe the way we look at executive function skills in students, is David Yeager posits that the frontal lobes are actually developed in teens. And I'm the mother of 2 teens. So I would love to talk with David about this sometimes, but I actually do agree in that teen student, they have the reasoning skills, but they don't access them when they're emotionally charged. And as we know, most of our middle and high school teens are kind of constantly, in some ways, they're easy to set off and charge. And a lot of them are living under stressful circumstances as well. So they're always kind of living in that land of not able to access the information they need. And so when you start with respect, where you can say, I know you've got these skills. I know you can do this. And here's what I already see from my interactions with you in the classroom that tell me you're going to nail this. It just puts them into a place of calm where then we can engage and start with the project or start with whatever we're working on. So the next slide in mine. So one of the key components too of the social optics program are what we call the lenses. And so these are 12 social critical thinking skills that we actually all use. They're not unique to individuals who think or learn differently. And so when I combined these with the approach of honoring what students already know and can do, we took these lenses and we focused on details and history in the curriculum, which you guys will see in that link. And what that does is details are the observable information. So things we can see, touch, taste, smell, or hear. We don't get into emotions. And then history, what do we already know? So we centered the idea of finding what is the problem or what is the thing we need to address around what are the things we see. And so the students I worked with identified that there was a loss of connection. There was nowhere where students who think and learn differently could maybe be on the same playing field in a social context as some of their neurotypical peers. And then history, what do we know about what's been tried? We had some good discussions around that. And then what the students came up with that they wanted to do was create an opportunity for more interactions in games. And so they decided to use the funds to buy a number of board games that then could transition with the whole entire class to their 7th grade. But also what we did was we bought a Nintendo Switch because the students are really awesome at Super Mario Kart and Super Mario Smash Brothers. And so within the group, there was a student with cerebral palsy. And so gross motor was really difficult for him, fine motor sometimes, but turns out he can use the controller like nobody's business. And so it was an area where he excelled. And so when we had all the materials the last 2 weeks of June for one lunch period, they invited a friend and a peer to come in. And it was incredible to see that connection because peers who saw them often, like in the PE settings, as not being able to do something or not having those social interaction skills to know when to prompt, when to joke, when to have fun. When they saw them in this setting, it was totally different. And so it was empowering for the students to see we had this idea, we got these tools, and now we're able to work with them, with our peers, and be seen differently and make more connections, which is what the very first quote was leaning towards. And one final thing before we move on to the next project person, but something that came up about during this project as well, which was very interesting, is there is a student in the 6th grade who was not identified for any services, just a very quiet young man, very kind, very respectful, excellent student. No one had ever questioned anything about why he never really talked that much. So he was invited by one of the other students into our group, and we were playing the game. And he was so excited, talking more than I'd ever heard. And he stutters, a very significant stutter. And so at the end of that lunch period, I just kind of pulled him aside and was like, hey, because I'm a speech therapist. I'm like, hey, have you had any help before? What are your strategies? What have you worked on? And his strategy was simply not to talk in more than like 1 to 2 sentences at a time so that he could manage his fluency. So just by virtue of listening to their voices, setting up a different setting in which they could interact and be themselves, we learn more about them. And then as adults, we can support them more. So now, hopefully, we're working on getting that students more support. So yeah, thank you. It was fun. This is a great group of people. It could not have been a better experience. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And I've heard the stories in our meetings and our check-ins, and it's just wonderful to hear and see it come to life. And that's a big win, I think, not just for the student, the example of your student with cerebral palsy, not just as a big win for the student themselves, but for the rest of the class, right? The rest of the students to have that, level up their own social and emotional intelligence, right? And to interact in such a fun way. So thank you so much for that, Carolyn. I'm excited to hear from Eileen from LiberatED. And folks, if you're listening in, if you just joined, please feel free to drop questions in the chat or use the Q&A function. We'll come back and dig deeper if there's any probing questions. So yeah, Eileen, tell us more about your project.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Carolyn, for sharing your work, and thank you, team, for supporting us. A little bit about who we are at LiberatED. Our mission and vision centers radical love, healing, and justice in social and emotional learning and education to support educators and youth mental health and well-being so all children can live, learn, and thrive in the comfort of their skin. And as you can imagine, in these times particularly, our mission and vision has become all the more needed in our communities. The way we think of our work for educators and students is offering them a soft landing space, given all that we're carrying during these challenging times. And so, and just a little bit about what we did, and then I'll go through 6 lessons that we learned from young people. So we conducted interviews with students across diverse backgrounds, across the country with varying learning differences, including ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and more. And what emerged was a clear roadmap from young people telling us exactly what they need to thrive. And so we're going to share that with you today in hopes that you can bring this to your own work. So the first lesson that we learned from young people is believe and fight for students to have access to necessary and equitable accommodations and resources. So, just to give a little glimpse, one student didn't discover their school had a dyslexia teacher until their sophomore year, similar to what Carolyn was saying about how so many young people, have needs and want support, and don't feel like they're able to go to the adults in their building. And so they shared that the teacher was overworked. They had compassion for this teacher because they were covering the entire school alone. And so we really need to think about, as community members, as activists, as parents, as educators, how can we ensure that all schools and all students have equitable accommodations to resources? So the second lesson that we learned from young people is listen with genuine understanding for students to feel accepted. This was major. Lenny touched upon it earlier about a through thread of all of our projects and all of our learnings, which was that young people really want to feel just understood and accepted for who they are, as teenagers, as Carolyn said, for their changing identities and changing needs, and to be responsive to that. So many of the students distinguish between teachers who just respond, versus those who actually listened and understood. And really the basic needs they were talking about was like remembering that they went to a basketball game, or remembering their favorite show and making those quick connections. And when the students were talking about their favorite teachers, really what they talked about is their favorite teachers accepted them and listened to them with genuine curiosity, not just to respond. As a former teacher, I totally get it. Sometimes we have a long list of things to do. I need to do this. I need to go here. I need to go there. And I had to actively remind myself to just stop, pause, listen, and also make that connection. And remember, not every young person wants you to solve their problems. They just want you to hear them. And that's something that the young people really shared. And so the third lesson that we learned from young folks was to offer students support regardless of their diagnosis. This is so important, and I can't scream this loud enough. Students really emphasize the importance of supporting them, even if they're not diagnosed immediately. We know getting formal diagnoses also creates inequitable barriers. Not everyone's able to get that right away. And so many students talked about their struggle to access formal testing due to financial barriers, family situations, but they still wanted that support to thrive. And so one student just really talked about how the learning center was at their new school was open for everyone. So how can we create community environments and education environments in which students don't need formal diagnoses to receive accommodations and support? Because we know sometimes that does take a long time. All right, and so then the fourth lesson that we learned from young people is to nurture welcoming and engaging in environments that honor and respond to students' diverse needs. So students really talked about their request that teachers offer multiple learning modes, which Carolyn also mentioned as well. Like, we're able to learn so much from young folks sometimes when we just switch up how they learn, and we're not policing what learning looks like, right? And so they just talked about having that balance between structure and flexibility. Many of the students did talk about the pressures of the structures within schools and not feeling like there's flexibility for their changing needs. One student shared that they want educators to allow people to try other things when one approach isn't working. So how do we approach education, not from a rigid standpoint, but a responsive standpoint for what young folks need? And so that was really an illuminating lesson. All right, so if we could go to the next. All right. The next thing that students talked about is wanting to invite students to share feedback about their school experiences and implement their recommendations whenever possible. The students shared so much with us. And as a former educator, I'd be remiss to say that I also felt sad, like, here I am, I don't work directly in the schools that the young folks were talking to me about, but it was so clear that nobody had ever asked them questions. Nobody had asked them, are they a part of the decision-making? And so how do we make schools places where young folks, we always talk about schools being that safe haven, and how do we return back to that goal? And so when we asked students if anyone had ever asked their opinion on how things work at school, their clear answer was no. Yet when we talked to them, they had this clear roadmap that was detailed, actionable recommendations throughout the interviews. And as someone that is a district administrator, what they were asking were not impossible things to do. And so really, I encourage you all to engage in listening tours for the young folks in your community and really ask them questions like, has any adult asked you, are your accommodations working? What recommendations do you have for students like you and for yourself to make it a place where you can thrive in the comfort of your skin? And so if we could go to our last lesson from the young folks, really another thing, and I keep making connections to Carolyn because our work as a team was also intertwined, but to provide more creative opportunities for students to demonstrate their learning. So students advocated for project-based learning centered on their interests rather than teaching to the test. And they often would just say, we know this is what's best practice for us. And so it's like, how can we make that, how can we really center what they need and allow their creativity to thrive in how we learn? And so, finally, if I could just summarize everything from our lesson, is that we can't ignore the stark resource inequities these interviews revealed. So as I shared earlier, one student didn't know there was a dyslexia teacher at her school until sophomore year. And when she found out, the teacher was overworked covering the entire school, she felt alone. And so another student's family had to pull him out entirely to homeschool him because the school system wasn't serving him. So families with resources, what we learned, because we also talked to students that had access to private and specialized schools, that families shouldn't have to exit the system to get good resources. Families without resources often felt trapped in these inequitable systems, and this perpetuates inequity and denies too many students the chance to thrive. And so our students are not asking for the impossible, they're asking for us to do what we already said we would do, which is center them and let them lead. And so that is my encouragement for all of the listeners today.
Thank you so much for that, Eileen. It's really interesting. Something that you said that resonated with me is that idea of almost like feeling bad, or like not, well, feeling bad, putting it a little bit too simply for this webinar, but when your students let you in, or when students confide in you, or when students are sharing this much with you, I don't know about you. I mean, I know that all of us here, there's this urge to like fix everything, right? It's like where do we begin, right? We want to fix everything. And so what I really admire, what really excites me about this project is that while we can't tackle every single problem or every single issue out there, the idea of like giving the voice back to the students at least is something that empowers them to and then maybe that kind of carries forward with them throughout the rest of their day, their year, their time as a student. So the ripples. That's what I was trying to get at. Sorry, I'm in conference brain. The ripples in the pond, right? This project, this 12-month initiative that we took on, while it technically ends at our 12-month mark, hopefully we're going to see those ripples, and hopefully those students will feel those ripples through their time as a student. Um, we've got some great stuff happening in the chat as well. I believe that we dropped we've been dropping the links for the resources along, and I'll be sending out a wrap-up email to everybody who registered. So whether you're watching this live or you're watching the recording back, I'll make sure that all of these resources are easy to grab, and they're in the EALA resource library. So if you're over on educatingalllearners.org and you're in our resource library, you can search the word Youth Action Project. It'll come right up. You'll be able to find all of our resources here in one place. We've also got a fantastic resource from Transition Academy. They were unable to join us for today, but they were our third pilot, and their work focused on students with intellectual disabilities. And they provided us with some fantastic resources, lessons, curriculum, framework, so that if you're interested in seeing how this rolls out in a third unique setting, it's all there, open and accessible to you. Great. So I've got some resources up here, and with our time remaining, we're going to ask each of our presenters two questions. The first question is, how do we get involved? How do we find out more about the work that you're currently doing? Where can folks go to get connected or stay connected? So I'll kick us off there. I'll throw it over to, yeah, whoever wants to come off mute, let us know. How can we stay involved? How can we stay in touch with you and your work?
I'll jump off first for you. Or okay, I wasn't sure. So yeah, I urge everyone just to take a look at the curriculum that's in the link, and then you can stay connected with me. I've had an email change, so it's Carolyn at mytransition360.com, or even through carolyn.long@montana.edu. So if you're also, interested in what does this all look like when we give voice through the transition process, how that often also reframes and changes career paths and how students approach what happens after the K-12 world. So yeah, you can reach out to me any which one of those ways, or LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way to get in touch with me, and I'll put the link in the chat. There's two organizations, Ethos Admissions and Ethos Pathways. And for the purpose of this project, we really served as the project manager, not necessarily working directly with students. Those were the three pilot groups. So I'll pop the link in the chat with both of those websites as well.
Appreciate that. Thank you. We'll update that slide to reflect the name, the rebranding, the name change.
Thank you. And you can find everything to connect with us on our website, LiberatEdSEL.com. We encourage you to follow our socials so you can really learn about our work. We offer free educator resources and also have active programming running. So if you are someone in Connecticut or knows a young person in Connecticut, this is actually the last week for them to apply to our youth leaders program. So we encourage you to share that. And also really, we encourage you to visit our website and our resources. And if you find them useful, we really want you to show your support by making a donation to us. As we know, many organizations are navigating troubling times. And so to keep our work alive and well, we encourage you to continue to show your love and support through a generous gift. So thank you, everybody.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna also leave my LinkedIn here in the chat, as well as you can see the work that we do at the International Youth Foundation on our website and our socials. And I'm just gonna share too that IYF worked as a thought partner in this project, but really we are very much into meaningfully engaging young people in diverse aspects of society, and we see that as the way of doing youth development. We may be working, continuing work that we were doing in participatory grant making for young people with learning differences. Really hoping that we continue that, and if that's the case, if you follow me or we connect on LinkedIn, you will hear when we recruit young people to be part of this. So if you work at school, or if you have, access to young people, especially those who have experiences of neurodivergence, they are more than welcome to apply, and we'll be happy to welcome them in that program. So yeah, thank you so much, and very happy to connect.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for your time, your energy, your expertise. And before we go, and again, folks, if you're listening in, or if you're in the room and you want to drop a question in the chat or the Q&A, I'll keep an eye on the chat before we go. But I always kind of like to wrap it up with big takeaway. Looking back over the past 12 months of implementing this project, implementing, supporting, if there's one kind of thing that you really want educators or parents, people out there who take care of youth, there's something that you really want them to take away from your experience. A little bit on the spot, but what's one big takeaway that you really hope folks can that you would want to impart on folks today?
Thanks, Aurora, for that great question. That's a big one. I would say kids want human connection. They want other people face to face. They want connection, and they want support to build those.
I think a big takeaway for me, I came into the community of practice for EALA wanting to learn more about how to support students with disabilities because when I got the invitation to go, I emailed Aurora back and said, we don't directly deal with students with learning disabilities, but it does happen and come up, and we would like to be well equipped with the resources. So it was quite an extraordinary journey working alongside all of these incredible organizations through this project and meeting others in the community of practice. And even as somebody who didn't know a lot about this world, I felt like I was armed with a ton of resources through EALA in order to navigate the space. And I'm still learning every day. So even if it's something that feels new to you, know that there's a ton of organizations that are doing this work and are excited to collaborate and work together. And EALA is a very good convener.
Thank you for that. But yes, it's 175 plus orgs in our coalition that contribute to that. So, and let's hear from Eileen. Yes.
Thank you. I love what Luciana said in the chat where she shared, listen to how students learn and use the feedback to guide your teaching. Great final word from our audience. And you know, I think about the African proverb of go fast alone, but together go far. And so number one, this project really illuminated that as organizations, when we work together, we can go much further than alone. So continue to build community would be an encouragement of mine. And then secondly, really thinking about how to let people within the disability community and neurodivergent community lead the conversation. And so if that is an identity that you identify with, then what does it look like to lead? And if you are an advocate, what does it look like to listen and support?
Thank you. And I guess for me, I would say that centering youth voice is something that gets thrown thrown around a lot. And I think that we need to really take into consideration what we mean with that and struggle with realizing that on not understanding what it really means perpetuates the same approaches that we have of thinking of yeah, young people can have opinions up to a limit, right, their perspective can be helpful to some extent, which in reality they can do so many things. We just need to create the supports, the environment for them to thrive, and that on its own creating opportunities for them to meaningfully engage and lead and be active agents of their education, of their development. It's gonna create positive impact on its own. So I really would love for everybody just to think about it and challenge ourselves in how we are perceiving young people and the power and agency that they hold in the work that we're supposed to be doing, which is supporting them. So yeah, I would say that. And as everybody else said, that you're not alone in this. Of course, challenging perceptions and notions that we have always carried, it's hard, and it requires a lot of work and support to you can get out of that. So you can always have and rely on organizations and consortiums like this just to help guide you.
Fantastic. I do see a fantastic question in the chat that I know that we just typed an answer to. And thank you all four of you for your on the spot responses. So I'm just gonna put one more question out there from the audience. I know it was addressed in writing, but again, folks who are listening, watching back, can't see the screen. I'm gonna read it out here. Do any of your projects work with youth remotely? Great question. What differences do you see between in-person and online, and how do you support accommodations, especially if a student uses an AAC device? Carolyn, you got a great answer written out. Do you mind coming off mute and just summarizing it, voicing it over?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we were gonna get
Please,
to that.
yeah.
So I just put in person versus online, I just see students, the depth of the conversation is you get into all these nooks and crannies, and students share a lot more when it's in person versus online. And sometimes you get into tangents, and you can figure out the context of where students are coming from, and then you can provide more scaffolding. And then regarding AAC, there are a number of programs now that do support online interactions, like in a Zoom room for students using AAC to be able to share what they're thinking, but sometimes they can still be tricky to connect and have them used well. So a lot of times it's a paraprofessional supporting those conversations, or if I'm lucky, a peer partner who's trained to support that student. But I think accommodations, and I'll let everyone else jump in here too, accommodations are often just very unique to that user who's online and their context. It's hard to just give like a blanket sort of answer to that one. So I feel like I didn't totally answer that question, but yeah. But I know everyone else in the chat will have great ideas.
Yeah, it's the answer of remote work, remote learning, and connecting with youth remotely is part of where EALA came from. We came out of a need during the pandemic when schools were shutting down, and how do we connect with our kids? How do we still provide service and support to our kids who learn differently? So there are a ton of resources out there ranging from, published in 2020 to 2026. There's a lot out there, and it can be hard to kind of parse it out and tease it out. Um, but I will echo the importance of um, there's it's while I think that most of these programs were in person, remote and online learning is very much for some students the only way they can access programs like this. So it's the challenge and the push for us to find those resources and make it happen. So I'd love to hear also from anybody else in the room. Eileen, I see you're ready to go. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, at LiberatED, the majority of our work is done remotely.
Great.
Yeah, and we do have hybrid and in-person options. But what I will say is that part of even what I said about building that community is I think it's important, and that's what we learned from the young folks, is that they have multiple entry points in receiving connection and community that they want and desire. And so remote actually, can offer young folks a safe space in which they can feel more comfortable to really express themselves without some of those social anxiety barriers. And also at LiberatED, we keep our programming really small so that things can be tailored to young folks as much as possible. And so that's why we're so grateful for EALA and, our supporters, because really when you think about how the field of education tends to prioritize things, it is often, breadth, not depth. And what we learn from our young folks is how important it is to have these spaces where they can go deep with each other and also adults. And so, I'm a big believer that both are possible in person and online.
Thank you. That really hits the nail on the head. It's they're different approaches, but they can also supporting the same goal. And yeah, for some students, that may be the only way that they're able to access some of our programs, some of your programs. So great question. So folks, we are coming up to the end here. This is my last slide. This is my last sort of stay connected, learn more. You're all here because of some connection to EALA, whether you're an EALA partner or you are associated with somebody who's on this call or who is an EALA partner. Here's how you can stay connected to us and continue to stay connected and build community. If you know an organization that would be a great EALA partner, an EALA partner is typically a .org or .edu, someone who's working in the nonprofit world with nonprofit status or a school or district. Make the connection, shoot them an email or connect them with me or reach out to me. I'm always looking for folks to add to that 175 and growing roster. If you're a .com or if you don't have that nonprofit status, please reach out anyway. Many of the folks in the EALA-verse, the EALA universe, are mission aligned .coms or folks who are not not nonprofit, but mission aligned and doing really great work. Several people on this call fit into that category of an EALA collaborator, not an EALA partner. But it's all about having an opportunity to amplify your work and get involved with the work that EALA is doing as well. Trying to keep an open door and not gatekeep, but just kind of keeping the community growing. Do you have a free resource, something that is free, open access that I can link in my library to link back to your work? We're not trying to co-op or to own anything. In fact, we're trying to index out and amplify the work that you're doing. Shoot that resource over to the email that's there in the chat, or again, email me, Aurora at innovateedu.nyc.org. And stay informed. We've got a newsletter, a subscription newsletter, goes out twice a month. Sign up for updates. It's free. Stay on top of upcoming events. Visit us at educatingalllearners.org. There's a sign up button right on top of the window. All right, folks, it is just about time for us to head out. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Eileen, Carolyn, Lanny, and Anna. Thank you to Getting Smart and to Transition Academy, who worked hard on this project, but were not in attendance for today's call. Their work is linked out and supported as well. So that's it for us, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for our attendees and our viewers. Thank you to my guests again. And that's it. Stay in touch, and we'll see you out there in the EALA-verse. Bye, everybody.